Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is a chamomile lavender tisane. I call it tisane like Poirot because that's what I like to call it, but it's an herbal tea. And yes, basic chamomile lavender. Had that many times, but it's relaxing and we all need relaxing. So I'm going to talk today. This is my little chat about January reading of 2025. And I have to say, the reading part of January was probably the best part of the month because I had some challenging things happen to me. Um, it was really cold for a good chunk of the month, which affects my health a lot. Um, my knees have been bad for some time now. They get worse in the winter, but oh my goodness, it got so much worse this month that I ended up in the ER, and I'm gonna have to get all kinds of physical therapy and things. It's a long road. Uh, it's not fun, but we all have something to deal with, and among other health things that I'm dealing with. So at least I had my books. At least I was perfectly capable of reading. I mean, there were days where I wasn't doing that much, but the day in the ER, I brought a book with me, but I didn't really feel like reading, so eh. But I was happy with what I read because number one, everything I read and finished, I should say, everything I finished was books that I owned. I have a couple of library books out, but I actually only finished books that I own, so that was part of my goal and mission accomplished. And also, this doesn't really matter, but I just found it interesting that they're all nonfiction. I did read, like I said, books I haven't finished yet. I have been reading from some novels and I'm enjoying them. So hopefully the next month or so you'll hear about them. Um, but they were all enjoyable books. Two of them were rereads. One was a book that I've had on my currently reading for over a year and I finally got to it. So all in all, I would say I was pretty pleased with my reading. And of course, as I'm going to do every January, Hardcover Hearts, great channel, started this tradition, and I will continue to do so as long as I can, which is on the first day of the year, which is usually a day off for a lot of people, including me, to read 84 Charing Cross Road again. Read or reread by Helene Hanff. This is my copy. I've had this for quite some time, and I love this edition. I wouldn't mind having another edition, but I'm good right now. So I love this picture because it's an actual photograph of the bookshop that is no longer in existence. It is a McDonald's, but let's not keep talking about that. I've talked about this book many times and her subsequent books, but just as a little summary in case you haven't heard of it, it is a collection of letters between Helene Hanff, who was a woman who lived in New York and who was a script reader and writer, but not extremely successful in her writing career, but a big book lover. And she really liked British books, and she had a correspondence with a bookshop, with the people in the bookshop, which was called Marks & Co. And the letters spanned from 1949 to 1968, and then also a little bit more the next year. And it's fantastic because it goes over all kinds of things that were happening during that time, like rationing, and of course discussion about books, which is the best part because Helene Hanff just loved to write and she loved to talk about books. And here were people, especially one particular person, who loved to discuss books as well on a professional and a casual level. So that's wonderful, and it's such a great thing for us to have. She was funny, witty and kind of, sarcastic, and they appreciated that. And so I love reading this first thing every year because it gets me into thinking about reading and the joy of reading. But I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to say it again because it affects me a lot. One of the things I learn and continue to learn from this book and the next book is patience. We have a little more of the need nowadays, and just speaking about reading, first of all, when we want a book, we want it yesterday. A lot of books are available to us digitally, and we could just sit at home on the worst possible weather day and just go onto a tablet or an e-reader or our phone, purchase or borrow a book and have it right there. Otherwise, we can, go off to a bookshop. We can go off to um, ordering things online, and usually they're in our hands pretty quickly. Now, when Helene wrote her first letter, within weeks she got some of the books that she requested. So that's pretty quick. Somewhat instant gratification, but at least one of the books that she asked for in her first letter, or attached to her first letter, did not arrive. They did not source it for her and send it to her for another 2 years. And that's a long time to wait for a book. Maybe she went to the library and looked for it in the meantime, but nevertheless, that was a long time. So, and even though she does make some complaints, they're good natured, they're humorous, and she gets more excited to get them in the first place. And I like that. I like that she, even though she will say things, she is willing to wait because it's worth the wait. So I have to remember that about books. Often, like I've been mentioning, lately I've been trying to not purchase as many books, not bring as many books home because I have too many at this point. There is such a thing. And I'm not saying I'm going to ban myself from buying books, but I'm just going to really slow it down. And I'm happy about that. I'm satisfied with that, shall I say. But every once in a while, I will see a post online somewhere, social media, etc., or on BookTube, where I see a book, maybe a new release, maybe something that I just haven't heard of before, and I want it now. And sometimes you just have to learn. You don't need it always at the moment that you first see it. You can wait. Sometimes you can wait 2 years, because sometimes I say, this is very true. Sometimes there are books that I want so much right now. I go through, I buy it, I get it, and I don't read it for another couple of years at least. So what was the rush? So learning the patience. But it also, when I'm ordering books from, UK books, which I love, it's one of my preferences, as you could probably see from all of these books, actually. I often nowadays order from Blackwell's. It's one of the places that has free shipping and reasonable prices, and they did a good job for me, because there is a book that I said, okay, I'm not going to be doing a lot of ordering in 2025, so I got one book that I ordered in 2024, and it said it was delivered to my home, and I never saw it, so I had to wait a certain amount of time. Got to the customer service and asked them about it, and I believe it was stolen, because it just, from what I can surmise, it just seems like it was stolen from my building. But I just don't know who would want to steal books in my building. I just don't know. But it was around the holidays, so sometimes people will steal packages. Anyway, but they were willing to refund me, and I ended up ordering it to have it sent to my workplace, which I don't do too much anymore, but I thought, let me try that this time. And it worked. And I'm not going to show it to you now because I don't have it here. When I finish reading it, I'll show it to you. But it was kind of fun, because someone at work, when it came in, I let them open it and look at it. So I was like, you could do the unboxing. Anyway, this is a little bit of a tangent. But the other thing, in terms of patience, that I learned too, is that Helene Hanff wanted to go to London and England for years. She already desired to do so when she started writing in 1949, and she did not get to England, I believe, until 1971, when she was in her mid-50s. And she had close to making plans many times over, and usually it was financial reasons that held her back. One of the things that really set her back was a massive amount of root canals. And as someone who had to just do one recently, and I only have to pay, I have dental insurance and it's only one tooth so far, although there might be more, the expense is crazy. It's crazy. And I doubt she had dental insurance, so she had to pay for multiple teeth. So that must have been something else. So she had to wait and wait and wait. And there were other things that set her back too, like she ended up moving to a new building, and she decided to have what she called real furniture, and she bought that probably full price, maybe layaway, I don't know. So that set her back again. And also just ups and downs with her employment. She was self-employed. And she came from a generation that was, they dealt with the depression, they dealt with all kinds of things, and they also had restrictions on credit, I believe, for women. But besides that, it was just such a principal thing that you don't use, credit. You don't go into debt for unnecessary things like travel. And I think she probably lived in that principle as well. So she wasn't about to just say, well, I just want to go, I'm going to charge it. No. So she waited and waited until the opportunity finally, when her book was published, it was popular enough that I think it was Reader's Digest paid for her trip. I mean, she was getting interviewed and everything and promoting her book. So it was slightly a working holiday, but it was definitely a trip of a lifetime for her, even though she was able to go back afterwards. And, excuse me. Oh, so lovely. But when she got back, someone had suggested to her that she keep a journal or diary, and she did that, and that became the other book I read, starting on the 1st of January, and I finished it a few days later, The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street. So I do recommend for people who read 84 Charing Cross Road, similar cover, except this is pink. For people who read 84 Charing Cross Road, not to spoil the ending, but it's pretty well known. The one thing that's frustrating is that you've been wanting her to go to England for so long, and you just have to, it just leaves off with, it's not going to happen. The adaptation for, the film that they did in the 1980s, excellent too. I recommend watching it. Does show a little more of the follow-up, but it's nice when you finish this book to go right into this, because then you can see her, going to the UK, going to mostly London. And it's humorous, and it's also, I mean, at times she's cranky. I totally relate to her. This was a long-awaited trip. She wanted it to work out well, and most of the time it did. But, she was going to have her moments of complaint. That's okay. But it's a pretty good discussion, and she is into some history too. So for me, that was pretty great. And a lot of the history that she's interested in is Tudor era, like Queen Elizabeth I. So that actually ties in very well with the other two books that I finished in January. And so we're going to start with this one that I started like a year earlier, and then finally picked up again. So that currently reading pile that I showed you all recently in one of my last posts, I'm making some dent, not a very big dent, but some dent, and this is one of them. So Thomas Cromwell, The Untold Story of Henry VIII's Most Faithful Servant by Tracy Borman. So this is a very good biography of this man who worked for Henry VIII. He also worked for Cardinal Wolsey before that. He had traveled a little bit, been to Italy and other places. Had what I would call great training for what he had to do. A lot of learning, Machiavellian learning, shall I say. But this was a pretty well-balanced biography of someone who is, I call him a gray area person, because I can't really say that he was a good man. He did some good things. He was kind to a lot of people that worked for him, and other people he had, merciful moments. Very hospitable, apparently. Even one of his, you call them enemies, I can't remember the word, the ambassador to the emperor, who was also the King of Spain and the nephew of Catherine of Aragon, Charles forgot the number now. I want to say 7th or the 2nd, or wow, it's not coming to me. Anyway, Charles, he had very gossipy correspondence. But even though technically Cromwell would have been, if not enemy, definitely on the other side, they still got along in some ways and spent time together. And interesting. So why I say I have like these two minds about Thomas Cromwell is because he did a lot of the work in orchestrating the execution of Anne Boleyn and other men, and men who were involved, but not really involved. Obviously these accusations were false. and they all went to their death, which is pretty messed up. Uh, I don't appreciate that that happened, but I also feel bad in some ways because it's like, what else could he have done? You know, he had seen how his predecessor, Wolsey, who he worked for and respected, fell from grace, very much so because he couldn't get the annulment or the divorce from Catherine of Aragon for Henry VIII. And Henry VIII, you know, was just loved this guy up until this happened, and then suddenly turned on him, would profess being loyal, but turn on him. And he knew this. So I almost feel like Cromwell was protecting himself. He just really did an overkill because, I mean, he was thorough. I don't like that about him, but it is fascinating. And also, he did some good things. I mean, the dissolution of the monasteries was partially a good thing because there was corruption, partially not great because there was a bit of a vacuum. What do you do when a big part of the community is just gone? You know, not a great thing. But he also helped in the translating of the Bible into English, like of getting it possible to be done and available in churches in England, which is a major thing. And just that he was such a hard worker and working for in that time period. He didn't come from nobility, which made him enemy of many people, not just the whole religious thing, which was another thing. The Duke of Norfolk, who was just a piece of work. Interesting too, but a piece of work. Not a nice person. Really not a liked person at all. At least, I mean, if I was gonna like hang out with one of them, I'd rather hang out with Cromwell because he just, doesn't seem like the life of the party either, but at least he would probably be someone you could talk to without being. Anyway, so what I do say though is that no matter what he did, which some of which I do not like or approve of, I do believe that he did not deserve to be executed. And the reason isn't because he was a wonderfully good person or such an innocent, but because he was definitely not a traitor to Henry VIII. Definitely not. And that's what he was accused of being. And he had made one error in orchestrating this marriage to Anne of Cleves. It was a political alliance, which was done for kings all the time, but Henry VIII had his own things, his own issues, and that was a weakness because Henry didn't approve and Thomas Cromwell didn't immediately find a way to end this relationship and find some other way, which I kind of wish he would have, because I mean he must have known where the wind blows, but whatever. And Henry didn't make it easier by giving him promotions to like Earl of Essex, I think, shortly before his arrest. It's like, what is this guy? He does this. He raises you up right before he throws you down. It's like he wants to put you in a higher position so that it hurts more when you lose everything. I don't know. But the point is that the enemies saw the weakness and were able to dive in and make it happen, and he got executed. And he got executed the same day that Henry VIII married Catherine Howard, which is not cool. So I just found his life quite good, and the book was very good. I have another book. I don't know if you can see it behind me here. Can I see it? I don't want to turn my back. It's somewhere around here. From another writer about Thomas Cromwell, which I might read sometime again, but not right now. This one I mainly picked up right now because Wolf Hall was coming back, and it will be. It was already back in the UK, but it's coming to America, the United States, whatever you want to call it. I don't know where I live. In I think March. So I wanted to brush up a little bit. It's been a while. So there it is. And last but not least, this is a book by a writer that I've only read one of his books, but I also follow him on social media, and he's pretty cool when it comes to history. And this is Nathan Amin, who wrote The Son of Prophecy, The Rise of Henry Tudor. There it is. Nice cover. So I like this. It's not just a straight up biography of Henry Tudor, because there are so many points in his life that there wasn't much coverage of it. So, but it really was not just the time period. of when he became, how he became the king of England, which was an unlikely thing because he wasn't born anywhere near next in line. But the Wars of the Roses was going, and then, oh, Freddie's here. And Richard III, and people were looking for another way, and next thing you know, he was being touted as, let's do this. And I'm not going to get, hi Freddie, I'm not going to get into the whole story of what happened because I've already talked about it numerous times. Freddie, out. He's putting his little needles in me because he's a little brat. But I love him. Anyway, he's a big Tudor. Anyway, he's cuter than Henry VIII though. Anyway, he's cuter than all the Tudors. Anyway, but basically, what is interesting about it is Nathan Amin is Welsh, so that is more of an interest for him, which is great for readers because he follows the Henry Tudor's ancestry back into earlier parts of English history of people who worked with different people in Wales and were involved in parts of English history in one way or another. And so it's like behind the scenes, unlikely candidate, all these ancestors that were sometimes involved in revolt, sometimes not, but they definitely weren't in any way in the royal line. And it also gets into a little bit about what happened to Wales, or how England treated them, and how certain limitations were put on them to have certain positions or land after, I think it was after Edward I mostly. And I known some of this. If you want if you're at all interested in learning about this Wales and their relationship with England, there is a 3-part, I don't remember which one is the first one. Is it Falls the Shadow or Here Be Dragons or whatever? But Sharon K. Penman wrote historical fiction about this time period. And it was a really, really good. And so I would look for that trilogy. It's a trilogy that gets into Wales. She's written a lot of other things. She wrote The Sun and Splendor, which was a very pro Richard III. Getting back to this, another thing I like about Nathan Amin is that even though he believes that Richard III had his nephews put to death, he is a little more sympathetic on why that had to happen. Not that he thinks that it was a good idea to kill, but the background of it. It's not a anti-Ricardian, it's just not pro. And that it's fair. I think it's fair. And he always emphasizes, not just in this book, but everywhere I've seen him write, he always emphasizes that there is no way of knowing. You cannot be sure of what happened then because we just don't have proof. It is a long time ago. There's no definitive proof of what happened then. However, this is what I think, etc. And I like that. I appreciate that about him. I like that he and Matthew Lewis and a couple other historians will debate together and still be friendly. It is nice to see that. And then when I say debate, it's not nasty at all. It's just, they actually find points that they agree on constantly, and I love that. So it is a challenge sometimes, this book, because, well, for me it's a challenge. Maybe not for everyone, but Welsh names can be hard for me. I've tried to learn how to pronounce them, but it's not the easiest thing because it's just not. And I'll continue to try to do better, but I just sometimes when you're reading it can be a little distracting. And I forgot to say something about I always do this where I forgot to say something about the other book. Just a little side note about the Thomas Cromwell book, speaking of difficulty in reading, is that sometimes she goes from source material like letters and goes into the spelling of their time. And sometimes I wish she really wouldn't have done that because it's hard to read. And I don't think it was necessary. I don't really need to be privy to the spelling of that time. It makes it like, yeah, right? But it's still not impossible. But Son of Prophecy, Welsh names are just not the easiest, but not impossible. Some Welsh names aren't so bad, but like the way they were mostly in past times and the way the namings were, really, Henry Tudor probably shouldn't have been called Henry Tudor, but that's okay. And the son of prophecy means that the bards of the time period when Welsh oppression was at its highest, and they wanted a savior, as it were. Every civilization wants a savior at some point, and they were looking for someone who would be that son of prophecy, and they believed that Henry Tudor was that person. And Henry VII, and to a point he was, because people started having higher roles that were, Welsh people started having some higher roles, and having some authority in Wales that they might not have had before. But it wasn't a sweeping thing that Wales was just at the top of the world at this point. But the fact that he came from Welsh ancestry, mixed with other things like French and English, etc., but still is pretty cool for them. I don't know, the people who started prophesizing, if they really would have seen it the way it turned out. And it obviously, any time someone can fit things into these things, but it's still interesting how it worked for, how the Welsh looked for something, and how they were able to, be excited about Henry Tudor, and how that might have helped him get support, although in the long run it was his stepfather. I think that was one of the greatest helps, plus some French people. Anyway, I mentioned Sharon Penman, or Sharon K. Penman, because even though I love this book and I recommend it very much so, excellent book, any book of his I think so far is very good, really good. But I also would say that maybe if you're not really familiar with Welsh history, and especially also if you're not that familiar with English history, maybe this is not where to start. But definitely once you read a little bit up on it, I would get there. But maybe start with some historical fiction of these time periods, and then some nonfiction after that. Anyway, so that's how I started. So it worked for me. So that's what I can suggest. Anyway, I've done a lot of chatting, and we're getting up in time for 4 books. But that's what I do. You can put it on high speed if you want. I know I talk fast as it is. It is what it is. That's all for now. Let me know if you've had any good reading in January, if you have read any of these books and also like them, or not so much, whatever. What do you think about these historical figures? Do you think Henry VII is at all someone that you are interested in knowing, or do you have no idea what he was like? Do you think that Thomas Cromwell has redeemable qualities? Do you want to live a Helene Hanff type of life, just writing to bookshops and living in a small bedsit for a long time and writing in scripts? I don't know. Anyway, that's all for now. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Said Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day.